good, good afternoon. I almost said good evening. It's good to be back, and I was talking to some people here. The last time I was here was that massive snowstorm, and that just added even more butterflies to what are already there in my stomach, because I was seeing the snow out this window, and look out the window now. It's just the perfect weather before the humidity comes, and then we're gonna wish for snow. So, I got a phone call, if I might embarrass you, from Phyllis Arnold. We spoke last time, and she's a descendant of, actually, the great-granddaughter of Carl Reinecke, who's, great composer, great pianist, should be more well known. But I'm going to play a short piece because I didn't have time to memorize it like I like to, but I did find something here, and we'll come to that towards the end. So I'll need the music and the stand. But what I was thinking to start with, because the whole drive here, I was listening to Carl Reinecke, two of his piano concertos, and trying to absorb his style. His style was unique. He had his own. He was a 19th century composer, born in what's now Germany, and back then it was like Saxony and all those things. Danish roots, and he studied with Mendelssohn. He studied with Schumann also at some point. So his style sounds similar to them. And maybe what I'll do is in the style of Schumann / Reinecke / Mendelssohn, in that 19th century style. If you wouldn't mind, I'll do an improvisation, but if you give me some silly melody, maybe a children's tune or something like that, that you would like to hear in this 19th century German romantic style. It might be funny, or it might be really sad on my part, but any ideas for a tune? Yeah.
Don't go under the apple tree with anyone else.
Okay, so, but in the style of Carl Reinecke / Schumann / Mendelssohn, in that time, and that, let's see if I can do it, so. Now that might be fun to do, but in all seriousness, they would do this stuff all the time. And that's the time, the 19th century, which I love so much for its music. Maybe I wouldn't want to live then because they didn't have air conditioning and a lot of reasons, but people like Reinecke, people like Leschetizky. We also have their recordings. We have recordings of Carl Reinecke piano rolls. And the freedom and spontaneity with which they play. They even change the notes that the composers wrote because they improvise. That's what they did. And I just have this hunger for that because I think it's incredible. So now I'm going to start the official program. I'm still doing the same theme I was doing in the winter, but totally different pieces, which is the violin. I'm obsessed with the violin, just completely, but I'm too lazy to learn it. My wife talked me out of it. I had this point that I wanted to switch instruments. I said, forget about piano, but she talked me out of it. And it's this same with talking about Reinecke. It's these old recordings that you can find on YouTube. Fritz Kreisler, Risha Elman, Nathan Milstein, all of these people that I'm obsessed. I can't get enough of it. The way they played, was full of just personality and spontaneity is the key word. So the first of these is an orchestral piece that violinists play all the time. This is the aria in D major by Bach. It's a very famous piece from the third orchestral suite. And this piano arrangement is by a Russian composer, 19th century also. His name was Alexander Siloty. He did many arrangements of Bach. Student of Franz Liszt, which is not bad, right? So this piece, I played the opening, it's so famous, even TV shows and things use it.
Yes.
Bach was a church musician for his whole life, and he would write in Latin. I knew this for a while. He would write dedicated solely to the glory of God at the end of every piece he wrote. I didn't also know that at the beginning of each piece he wrote, he would write, Lord help me. Which is, yeah. And, it's very good. And here's the thing, this music, you can hear the prayerful quality, you can hear his spirituality, his religious inclination, and it's so peaceful and tranquil. But he had about 20 children or so. I've always wondered, how did he reach that emotion? I have 2 small kids, and preschool just ended, and I don't know, there's no peace and tranquility. So,
Was he deaf?
no, that was Beethoven.
Well, I just thought it might help.
Actually, true, you're right, it would have helped.
Yeah.
He did lose his sight, though, unfortunately. Actually, I think the reason he lost his sight later was Bach, because he would do a lot of his work at night by candlelight, and not a good thing either. So, anyway, here is the aria. Aria means air. It refers to sung music, usually in operas. He didn't write operas, Bach. He didn't write one opera. He wrote cantatas for the church, and this is in that spirit. So. composure, all these things I can't do. So this is an odd piece. This is Leopold Godowsky, who was a great pianist and composer at the turn of the 20th century. Not Stokowski, the conductor, different, similar name. So this is Godowsky's arrangement of Fritz Kreisler's arrangement of a Beethoven piece, a Beethoven fragment. This is the Rondino on a theme by Beethoven by Kreisler. And the story of this piece is that Beethoven wrote it when he was 23 years old only, 1793. He wanted it to be part of his wind octet, and it just didn't happen. He didn't finish it, he didn't include it in there, and left it as this unfinished, incomplete draft of sorts. Fritz Kreisler, about a century or so later, arranged it into this piece. And Kreisler loved to do things like this. He would even write pieces, say in the style of somebody, and claim that they wrote it. Or he would take something like this and sort of mishmash, put it together, and he would present it as not his work. Because he found that in his early concerts, if he announced that here's a piece I wrote, no one would take it seriously. So if he just said, well, this is something I discovered somewhere by Beethoven, but he wrote it. But in this case, it is actually by Beethoven, the melodic ideas and everything. Rondino means a short round, and a round is something in poetry or music with a refrain. So there's a refrain, this melody. Etc. That's the refrain, it keeps coming back. And this piece, it's before Beethoven's later life, the demon, all the demons of his later life, mostly connected to his deafness, losing his hearing, we were talking. This is a much more innocent Beethoven. It's a lyrical Beethoven, which we might not always be so used to when we're thinking of those, right? But this is before all that, before the Ninth Symphony, before the Missa Solemnis and all that. So here it is. capriccio towards the end that foreshadows later Beethoven. When it goes C minor, right here, you heard it. But not for long. Not for long. It's like there's a taste of that. Next is another Godowski arrangement. This is a piece by Georges Bizet, Adagietto from L'Arlésienne, Suite Number 1. It's a long title. But Bizet was this great French composer, and also in some ways underrated, because we obviously hear Carmen a lot, the great opera, which is a Spanish opera written by a French guy, go figure, but in music, those things don't matter. Nationalities, it shouldn't matter at all, but I love that in music, the ethnicity of a composer doesn't matter really. Music's international. So, but at any rate, Bizet wrote lots of other things. He didn't live too long, unfortunately, but he wrote a symphony in C major, he wrote piano music, beautiful music, and then he wrote these L'Arlésienne suites, which are incidental music. Incidental music means background music for plays, or nowadays could be for a TV show or Netflix or something. You know, in Seinfeld, there's that's incidental music. I know that might not be like Bizet or anything, but it works. And so this was incidental music for a play of the same name, L'Arlésienne, by Alphonse Daudet, French writer. L'Arlésienne means a woman from Arles, which is a city in Provence. So here it is. It's the last few things, the first few things I played were written by German speakers. I think of language, how it influences it. You know, German speech is a little more precise sounding. The words are ja, guten Tag, das ist sehr gut. You know, Wiener Schnitzel. It's got, but the French language is a little more like you've got cotton candy in your mouth, and it's, you know, on the paw, you know, it's like some Southerners, they talk like that. Because it's too hot to be, well, I was down by the Walmart today. I feel like, I don't know, but there's something in the music that parallels that. I think you'll hear what I mean. I know I'm joking here, but I'm really serious. The music has a different articulation from the German stuff, and it feels like when I play this, I feel like I'm looking at a Renoir painting or something. So it's a little fuzzy. It's different. It sounds more like a souffle or something. It's lighter. So now I'm going to play a piece by Joachim Raff, R-A-F-F, Swiss composer. You ever heard of him? Really? You haven't? It's okay, me neither. I hadn't heard of him until I learned this piece, until I came across this piece. Raff was same generation as Reineke. Great composer, like Reineke was, and very popular during his lifetime, and unfortunately not so much remembered today. And there's no good reason for that. You know, it's great composers we're talking about. We're a little bit too selective with the names that we pick. So this, maybe one thought I have is Raff's music, like his symphonies, if you get a chance, listen to his third symphony. It is so beautiful. It's a little old-fashioned. It's not a bad thing at all. In fact, I like that about it. But it just, this piece too, this is the cavatina, which means short song, by Raff. And this will be the last of the mellow pieces I'm playing for a little while. I like to start with some mellow, like, appetizers, and then we're going to have some more crazy music. So, but this Raff, this melody, it's just, I love it so much. It's so beautiful. So here it is. I told you, now the crazier music. I don't remember if I played you Paganini last time. If I did, I may have in the arrangements of Franz Liszt, because those are the famous arrangements of Paganini for the piano. Today I'm going to play some of Robert Schumann's Paganini arrangements. So, Paganini was this wild man, this great violinist, lived in the late early 1800s. He was quite controversial for the music he wrote, for even the way he performed, even the way he looked. Now we know he had Marfan's syndrome, which gave him a very long face and exaggerated long fingers. And at that time, though, there were people who thought he was possessed. He wasn't, but just he was so controversial. And I think of him, some people compare him to like a rock star of today, and I think that's fairly accurate. That's what he was like. And so if you were used to Mozart and Haydn, his music was just outlandish. But if you were actually the generation a little bit after him, the Romantics, born in 1810 or so, like Schumann and Liszt, born in 1811, they idolized Paganini because they saw the roots of their style in him. I think Beethoven and Paganini were these two monumental figures, and they both of them, their lifetimes straddled the 18th and 19th centuries. So, and they sort of pushed music forward in a way. One violinist, Ivry Gitlis, said Paganini was like the Big Bang in music. Just comes out of nowhere. Mozart, for instance, you can trace the influence of his father, Leopold. You can trace the influence of the Buxtehude on Bach, for instance. But with Paganini, he's his own thing. His music, his style just comes out of nowhere. So I'm going to start. This is the first of Schumann's arrangement. And Schumann, he did his own arrangements of Paganini as a young man in the 1830s, same time as Liszt did them. And they're not played as much as the Liszt ones, but he arranged a lot of caprices that Liszt didn't arrange, so it's very interesting. And it fits in with my crazy violin theme, so so here it is. We'll see why people thought he was out there, and he was. So I have a funny story about that. Oh yes.
Do you have to have caffeine before that?
You know what's funny is that you said that. You took. You just got the funny story. I was thinking. No, you're right. No, it's okay. So no, it's not sorry. It's perfect because you know, I love that you said that because I had that thought, and the reason is when I went to Italy, and I felt like that. You know, he was from Tuscany, Paganini. And you can say, if you say the word Paganini, you can convince people who speak Italian. Paganini. My mother, actually, I tell this later maybe, but my parents are both immigrants. My mother's from Soviet Russia, and my dad is from Southern Virginia, but that's another story. So I'm not, you know, I'm a Southern Russian. But my mother, the first stop, or I think the second stop after leaving Moscow, they were in Italy for a while. And they were on a train somewhere outside of Rome, and everyone was staring at them. Because these people, they're not Italian. So one of her friends said very quietly, just say the word La Scala after every sentence loudly. We'll fool them. So they were talking in Russian, and then at the end they would say, La Scala. So you can do the same with Paganini. It's just such a beautiful thing. Italian is the most beautiful. Why is opera in Italian? The language sings. But anyway, that was a story within a story within. So when I was in Italy, I felt like Paganini's the mood of that piece. And I realized why after a few days, because the coffee's so cheap and so good. So maybe there's a theory as to why Paganini was a wild man. It was maybe he was drinking too much coffee and his blood pressure was high. So I don't know. But yeah, there's another, you know, I played this piece for my kids' preschool. I have two sons, 3 and 5 years old. 5-year-old just graduated, and it's really, it was overwhelming. Thanks. I can't believe it. It's like he was just born. But I don't know how they allowed me to play Paganini, but I went, and the first piece I played was the Bizet. And I usually don't play for preschoolers, but I thought, okay, how am I going to talk about this? I can't say to them, well, you know, this was late 19th century France. So it's not really going to stick. So I said, what does this make you feel? What do you imagine? So the Bizet, I played it, and one kid said, very calm, but a little bit sad, but a little happy. So I said, that's it, perfect. It's so insightful. And then I played Paganini, and from my side vision, all of their little feet started doing this. You know, just from the first few minutes. And I asked them, I said, what do you make of this? And one kid in the back said, very disturbed, in a disturbed tone, he said, anxious. You're perfect, you got it. So, the next one this is actually one Liszt arranged, but the Schumann version is totally different. This is La Chasse, which means the hunt. And while I don't hunt, I know people who do. Nowadays, they'll use, they go to Walmart and buy one of those duck whistles for hunting. But in those days, they didn't have that. They used French horns. And French horns, or some type of brass horn, they sound like this. That's the piece. You have a lot of that in classical music, like Mozart. There's in the F major sonata. So whenever you have that, it's usually a musical symbol of, well, we're in the countryside. Normally what it signifies. So here is this piece, La Chasse, the hunt. I played this somewhere, and a guy came to me and said, I used to hunt, and we used horns, and he said, I'm going to go to my room and get it. And he brought me this horn. So it maybe not so long ago, before the duck whistle, but I just wonder if Paganini lived in rural North Carolina, he would have written a different piece. this one is proof he was not only a showman, because this is more quiet and it's more personal in a way. It also reminds me of guitar music because you have these strummed, sounding like strummed chords. And turns out he was a guitarist too. Great guitarist, which also sort of makes sense, the parallel with a rock musician. He was pretty much like Jimi Hendrix. He also played guitar, right? So, or Keith Richards or something. So here is the next caprice. It's kind of short. And I read somewhere that he didn't intend for all of his pieces to be played publicly. And maybe this was one of those, because it doesn't sound like something he's showing off with. It's like more like a diary entry or something. It's very strange, because have you ever met someone who's a little high-strung and maybe you've met this type of person, who's just joking around, laughing, talking, very pleasant, and then something sets them off and they go berserk with anger. And then it ends as if nothing. I don't know if actually I've met there's some dogs like that too, or cats. They'll be good-natured and friendly, and I don't know, you touch their ear the wrong way and they flip out. That's this piece. It's like Jekyll and Hyde. It starts out scherzando, which means joking in Italian. Scherzando. Sounds like someone laughing. Like, there's those horn calls again. So it's so fun and good-natured, and then all of a sudden it just. Where did that come from? And then it just goes back to being funny. The word scherzo in Italian, or scherzando, it's a misleading word, because yes, it means joking, but Chopin wrote 4 scherzos, and here's the second one. Beginning. Is that funny? Where's the joke there? And I think that there's a jump scare. It has a great jump scare. And so I think it's more along the lines of the word like wit, scherzo. There's a wittiness to it. There's a sharp, sarcastic wit, and that's Paganini. He has that so much. I think that actually really defines his style as sarcastic wittiness. So here it is. This is the next Schumann. This will be the last one of these that I do, and then have some more things in the Reinecke piece, which I'll play, and maybe some gospel too. So. I know I think I played you the second movement only of the Beethoven Violin Concerto last time, which is the slow movement. And now I'm going to play the third movement. So, Violin Concerto for violin and orchestra, how on earth does it work for the piano? Well, he rewrote it for piano. He wrote a piano version of it because the first performance was such a disaster. Partially because the first movement, which is very long, it's beautiful, but it's about 25 minutes, half the audience fell asleep. And the violinist Franz Clemens was also very upset with the fact that Beethoven handed him the final pages of the piece about a few minutes before the performance. He'd written it that morning. Talk about procrastination. So in the middle of the piece, seeing the asleep audience members and being frustrated with Beethoven, the violinist at the premiere, he stopped the music, he turned his violin upside down and improvised a country fiddle tune to wake people up and also to sort of show his displeasure at Beethoven. This is kind of not very nice. So Beethoven was not happy, and he rewrote this as a piano concerto. And it fits very well with my crazy theme here with the violin. But what happened was both the piano and violin versions were sort of forgotten for the rest of his life. And then after he died, it was really Mendelssohn who resurrected, by the way, teacher of Reineke, Mendelssohn. So, but there's this alternate version for piano. And I've arranged it a bit to include the orchestra, because it should be for piano or violin with orchestra. I couldn't bring an orchestra today, sorry. They couldn't all come. So the piece is he wrote it in 1806. And in the beginning today, I played an early Beethoven piece, but this he wrote when he was going deaf, and he knew it. And it was around this time, a couple of years before, that he wrote a letter. It's now called the Heiligenstadt Testimony, where he describes his feelings about losing his hearing. I would recommend to read it. He even at one point says he wanted to take his life because he saw no hope. But he found hope somehow. And by the end of his life, Beethoven almost couldn't hear at all, but he could hear music in his head. So if he could do that, it kind of goes to show that anything's possible. I think that's why Beethoven speaks to us after, 200 years, because there's this hope and triumph in the human spirit and in his music, I think. And he had a very difficult life. He isolated himself from others, but he had a certain joy to him. And you hear that also, of course, famously in the Ode to Joy. But listen to that piece, listen to the whole symphony. Most of it is dark, but then you get to the Ode to Joy, and it means all that more after that. This last movement of the violin concerto, it's a similar trajectory. The first two movements are very philosophical, but this last movement, it's a lively Ländler dance. It's a rustic farmer's dance in 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. It's like Oktoberfest music. I'm not joking. The Ländler is sort of the cousin or ancestor of the waltz. You make the waltz you make the Ländler a little crispier, a little lighter, then the Ländler becomes a waltz. But this is a Ländler, and it's just purely joyful. I'm going to start with a segue from the second movement into the third movement to show how some of that darkness goes into the light of the third movement. So it's really uplifting. I want to close with this, and then I'll play Reineke, and then maybe one gospel, or two. So we'll see. But thank you all so much, and thanks, Corey. Appreciate it. I haven't done the Beethoven, so hopefully do that also.
need to put this back. My apologies for not memorizing this. I should, but
That's amazing.
I mean, I owe it to Ryan. Maybe next time I will, but let me just put this thing back. All right. By the way, if you do need to leave for any reason, I know I'm going a little over. It's okay, but
I hope you hear the Reineke. So this is, of course, I mentioned Phyllis Arnold is a descendant of Carl Reineke. And here's a piece called Au clair de lune, which means in the moonlight, by Carl Reineke. And I guess I'll say a few words about who he was. He was this great, great, great composer in the 19th century. I mentioned he's not played as much as today as he should be, but that's actually not true. In the flute world, his sonata for flute and piano, it's called the Undine Sonata. That's played a lot. That's standard repertoire. My wife is a pianist, and she specializes in accompanying, and she plays that piece with flute players. So, Reineke, the way I got into Reineke was there are recordings of him playing the piano. They're piano rolls because, you know, it was before recording technology, but you get a really great sense of how he played. And he is the earliest born recorded pianist. He was born in the 1820s. And if you think Brahms was born in 1833, you know, Chopin, Liszt, Wagner, they were all born in the 1810s. He was kind of in that generation, but he outlived them all, lived into the 20th century. And the way he plays, it takes my breath away because and also the way he composes, of course, the two go hand in hand. But he represents a different way of playing the piano. I'll give you an example. I'd recommend you go hear it. When I used to teach, I would show recordings of Reineke to my students, and they would be shocked, and I would say, that's what it's like drinking milk from the cow after you've been used to pasteurized milk. Because he doesn't play it exactly the way. So take a famous Mozart, Rondo alla Turca, you know. Well, just that opening part. Reineke plays it with so much imagination. He changes time all the time. So he just does it. So, on first listening, it might sound strange, but after you get used to it, you realize the imagination. He's telling a story. He's giving you imagery with it. And it was just a whole different outlook. I said the 19th century was great, except for, you know, no air conditioning, a lot of other things. But musically, there's something there. So this is a lovely piece in the moonlight by Reineke. I'm going to do my best with it, but this is in honor of Reineke and Phyllis because it's quite. I almost fainted when she told me that. So.
Thank you.
Real quick, I'm going to do a gospel. I always like to close with gospel. I mentioned, you know, my mother's from Russia, my dad's from Southern Virginia. That's where the gospel music comes from. So real quick, I'm going to play, this is like the first one we've had in the last 3 weeks, The Unclouded Day. It's an old gospel tune, so here it is.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
We'll call it a day.
Did you start playing at 3?
More like 4, but I was terrible at 4 and 5 and 6. Well, some people are great at that age. I was really
But you started young.
Yeah, sort of, yeah.
And family roots, where's the music?
It's not. They like music, but they're not musicians. They love music.
Oh my.
I had good teachers, and I practice. I practice a lot now. That's the trick. Oh yeah, I had home. I went all the way through doctorate in piano. So, well, I went to. Let me close this thing.